Hey, Chris from Codify Academy here. In this video, I want to explore how we use combined CSS selectors to be more specific on what elements to style. Let's say we have a div with a class of food, and we've styled all of the p tags inside of that with a background of gold. Then, let's say we want to update one element inside, the last p tag, so we can add a class and use a combined selector to apply some styles. In CSS, the closest selector to the opening curly bracket is called the key. This will determine what elements the properties are going to be applied to. Anything to the left of this key is known as a pre-qualifier and helps identify the key elements to style. Okay, if we look at our first combined selector, .food space p, we have two selectors in there. We have a class and a type selector. These are separated by a space, and the key is selecting all paragraph elements. And because there's a pre-qualifier class selector of food, the combined selector will only select paragraph elements that are nested within an element that has a class value of food. And the second selector, .food space p .pizza, includes three selectors. We have two class selectors and one type selector. The only difference here is that we added a class selector of pizza to the end of the paragraph type selector. Because the use or omission of spaces will always make a difference in a CSS selector, it means that this selector is only going to select paragraph elements with a class of pizza. If we remove that paragraph type selector in our CSS and we leave a space on both sides of the pizza class selector, it's going to select any element with a class of pizza, not just paragraphs. So the best practice here is to actually not prefix a class selector with a type selector. So generally, we're going to select elements by a given class name, not just an element type. And following this best practice, we would update our combined selector here to .food space .pizza. And it's going to target all paragraphs with a class value of pizza that are found inside of an element with a class attribute value of food. And before we practice more, let's look at how combined selectors change a selector's specificity weight. Remember, each selector has a weight, so when we combine them, the browser will calculate the additional weight. So let's look at our first one, .food space p. It's going to have a class and type selector. So we know that the point value for class is 0-1-0, and the point value for a type is 0-0-1. So if we combine those two, we get 0-1-1, and that's going to be the new weight of this selector. Our second selector, .food space p .pizza, has two class selectors and one type selector. So the combined weight would be 0-2-1. The 0 is for the first column. We have no ID selectors. The 2 in the second column is there because we have two class selectors, and the 1 in the last column is for that one type selector. If we compare these two selectors, the second one, which has a higher weight because the 2 is greater than a 1, means it's going to take precedence in CSS. So if there's ever a conflict, this one's going to win. Even if we flip the order around of the selectors, we place the higher weighted selector above the lower weighted selector, the appearance of that style shouldn't change because of that selector's weight. Remember, it only matters if there are multiple selectors trying to apply similar properties to the same element. Otherwise, normal cascading laws are going to apply. Whatever's found last is going to take precedence. In general, we want to continue to learn more about specificity. The higher our CSS specificity rule goes, the more likely it is that our cascade is going to break.